My name is Leon. At least that's the name of Kit de Wol's debut novel, published in 2016. This is a book of humble and childlike immensity, so together we shall analyse the features of the book, as well as 3 literary techniques that heighten those features, and some of the book's surrounding context, so that we may have a fuller and deeper and greater appreciation and understanding of what Kit de Wol's vision was for this quiet and fiery novel. My Name is Leon is told from a closed third-person perspective, which means that the story is told through one person but never directly from them, Leon being our conduit for his juvenile thought processes of his surroundings. That isn't to say that he is unintelligent, but that he, even with his intelligence, the youthful thought processes he has lead to many misunderstandings between him and some of the other characters. The misunderstanding due to Leon's constant eavesdropping throughout the book is mentioned directly to him by only two characters, one being Leon's mum, Carol, and the other being his foster carer, Maureen. Kit de Wol utilises these moments to highlight the differences between the two parental figures and how they talk to Leon. Carol is the first to mention it directly to Leon. In chapter 4, just after Jake's, Leon's baby brother, father warns Carol to stop reaching out to him and leaves, Carol exclaims, to quote, "What are you doing listening? You're always creeping around listening to something." That's chapter 4, page 18. This shows de Wol's characterization of a mother who is projecting, of a mother on the end of her tether and is starting down a road that leads to many more tragic incidences for her children, which de Wol has seen directly because of her previous vocation as a worker in criminal and family law, allowing her to realistically portray the nuances of subpar parenting. In contrast, Maureen, in chapter 41, talks to Leon rather than scolding him, treating him as an equal, as she has done from the very first time they met, and tells him that, to quote, I'll tell you what the danger is in hearing half a conversation. You're likely to jump to conclusions." By having these moments, de Wol shows us a key subject matter that is made evident from the very first chapter, and that is the patronising attitude towards young children. Of course, whatever a child says should not be taken at face value, but Leon is often dismissed or treated unseriously by characters who ought to be heeding him more than they do. Much of this stemming from de Wol's own experiences of such interactions, not just from her own troubled childhood, but also her time in criminal and family law, as previously stated. And de Wol talks about her childhood more in Without Warning, and how she can effectively demonstrate that in this novel. Only a handful of de Wol's characters talk to Leon rather than about and or at him. And the realism of this is made evident when the context of her own childhood and her profession comes into the forefront of contextual understanding. Despite the limited information on Kit de Wol as compared to other prominent authors due to her being alive and privacy, her semi-autobiographic book called Without Warning and Only Sometimes, published in 2023, allows a view into her past, which spotlights a lot of the characters in My Name is Leon as being a mimicry of her own childhood. Pardon me. For example, de Wol's parents were from different countries. Her mother was Irish and her father was Caribbean, making it immediately evident the links between these two nationalities and their strenuous ties to England, and that strain passing on through the book, which is manifested in the characters of Mr. Devlin and Tufty. Mr. Devlin being Irish and Tufty being Caribbean, of which are introduced fully once Leon goes to the allotments. And beyond the Wall's personal experience within her family, she utilises a very specific historical event to demonstrate this conflict and to tie it to the reality of the strain between these cultures, between these cultures towards England, and the truth of their climax with their Handsworth riots in 1981. A time of cultural strife which began in Brixton, leading to riots erupting across the country, one of which de Wall lived only a road away, the Handsworth riots. This moment, later in life, gave de Wall the imagery that she would use as an emotional amplifier for not only Leon's gathering of emotion towards the end of the book, but to also serve as a dramatic climax for the overall, rather melancholic tone of the book. Though briefly mentioned, now we look at the three literary techniques with more detail. One of which could be argued as a narrative technique, but there's evidence for both cases, for it being both cases. These techniques are motifs, under-lexicalization, and the narrative/literary one is closed third person, which we touched upon briefly. Let's look at the close third person. This is how the story is told, but it also informs not just the narrative language of the novel itself, but of Leon's use of language in his childlike headspace. This is made evident when, in chapter 3, he lists the things that he notices that make his mother cry. To quote, when Jake begins to make a lot of noise, when she hasn't got any money, when she comes back from the phone box, when Leon asks too many questions, and when she looks at Jake. Narratively, it serves to tell the reader how unstable Carol is, that even the smallest of things are upsetting her. But it also works for more than that. It shows us that even with Leon's ability to pay close attention, he is unable to fully understand it, thus creating a constant throughout the book that serves to show us that he is still a child, as all the other literary devices do demonstrate. The next literary technique is one that hides in plain sight, and that is under-lexicalization. This is used in junction with closed third person to further illustrate Leon's youth, amplifying the struggle of his character and his forced maturity due to horrid circumstances. This technique is present throughout the whole book, but one specific moment that uses it directly is the use of the word neckback in chapter 9. And although he got this word from his father, who had a thick Caribbean accent, Leon uses it continuously throughout the book whenever Maureen grabs his occipitable bone. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I listened to it 1,000 times, still couldn't get it, so I apologise on that front. Occipitable bone is, if I'm occipitable bone, I'm terribly sorry for that, but anyway, let's stop digressing. Which is what he is attempting to refer to. So it is just the bone that connects your skull to your spine, and neck back with how he describes where he's being grabbed, sort of, is what, at least what I imagine, is what he's trying to get at, where it just where there's just that bit of gap and it's getting pinched, which would be certainly painful. Alone, it could be seen as an easier word to remember and appears clearer in its immediate meaning. But the implicature of him hanging on to words that are simpler from his father's less than fluent English shows not only his attachment to his father, but it shows, rather than tells us, that he is still a young boy. And it is that element that highlights the severity of his position. Kit de Wall has used this device more infrequently compared to some of the other literary techniques because, for the most part, Leon's thoughts are mature, which makes the reader lose that sense of youth on occasion. But then his age is starkly resounded in that purposeful word, neckback, flooding the reader's thoughts with the reminder of his youth and his attachments to his father. Motifs are a common literary device in fiction, but de Waal uses it to a greater effect because of how she directly ties it to the structure of the whole book, via the use of images instead of chapter numbers. But we'll look at that independent of this section. There are a few key motifs throughout the whole book. The most prominent one, I believe, to be that of the soldier. Whether it is Leon watching Dukes of Hazzard, playing with his action men, or dreaming of being in war himself. In particular, in chapter 7 and in chapter 37, de Waal has Leon embody the soldier in two distinct ways. The first in his dream, and secondly when he's trying to warn Mr. Devlin and Tufty to leave him be. Looking at chapter 7 in more detail, we see that his dream serves as a flashback within the story itself. After Leon asks for a bedtime story from Maureen, but she says, "I'm no good at stories, me. I don't see the point in half of them." So she asks him for a memory instead, something that actually happened. And he tells her about his dream as a soldier, wading through a jungle with his troops. But the argument that his mother and father were having downstairs penetrated his dream and got his men killed, including himself. And there's a very vivid image of him stepping over his own body to go to the toilet, because that's another sort of recurrence throughout the book, is that when there's excitement, he goes to the toilet, he needs to wee. Kit de Waal has manifested in Leon's dream his experience with conflict and his want to fight back, to have power for himself, but it is ultimately overpowered by the adults in his life, which feeds into his actions in chapter 37 directly. After Leon runs away after eavesdropping on another conversation and presumes the worst, as is to be expected with his experience throughout the book, he runs away and stops by the allotments to gather some more supplies from a shed that he had found abandoned earlier in the book. But Mr. Devlin and Tufty hear him and confront him, without the knowledge that it actually is Leon. They just think that because the riots are occurring in this chapter too, sort of coincide, and that becomes vivid later on, but they go to investigate. They don't know that it's Leon, which leads to Leon being cornered in his shed to pull out a knife that he'd stole from Mr. Devlin. To quote, "It's about time everyone realises who they are dealing with." Kit de Waal doesn't just manifest Leon's experience of conflict in some metaphysical way again. This becomes the legitimizing moment of that motif. He becomes the image of the soldier he has had in his head for many moments in his life and throughout the book. He feels that he finally has some power over the adults that constantly command him rather than listen to him. This is a private climax of that fantasy. Despite his bravery when in the midst of the riots, he uses his innocence as a weapon against the enemy, rather than his power in chapter 39. When a riot officer is beating Tufty and Mr. Devlin, Leon, with a simple plea, to quote, "Can you help me?" This is the finale of that soldier motif. De Waal has Leon face an armoured foe, a literal soldier, if you will, right, as somebody who's trained to fight. And she makes him use his innocence as his defence, bringing back that youthful spirit amid an internal anarchy and external chaos that is within Leon's character in this moment. Looking at the whole structure of the book, via semiotics, which is the study of symbols. It shall reveal a myriad of images, primarily the use of illustrations for each chapter opposed to numbers. Kid de Wall uses key items or ideas in each chapter as the illustration for that chapter, many of which are directly connected to the themes, motifs, foreshadowings, and characters, which allows the reader to grasp what may happen in the coming chapter or purposefully deceive them to the severity of that chapter's intensity. An example of an illustration acting as foreshadowing, is in chapter 29. The visual for that chapter is a gun that Leon steals from Mr. Devlin's shed, but clearly it's a wooden gun in the image. It's obvious, there's no trigger, it's carved, you can see the grooves, but which isn't directly revealed to be the case until chapter 38, when Leon pulls it out in the middle of that same riot to ask for directions. Again, playing into that soldier role, but him having a gun, feeling that he has the power. And it becomes a Chekhov's gun for the audience. It's set up early, not knowing its importance until it's revealed in the climax. In this almost being an anticlimax, right? Anticlimactic, because the gun isn't real. Once again, using the symbol of a violent weapon, but with the twist of its harmlessness. There are many angles in which the use of images can be seen, but one undeniable view is that it plays alongside a childish view of events, becoming a visual for a younger mindset, because few children would remember a chapter number and the events therein, but what they do is take a key image from that chapter and remember the contents that way. Let's imagine, for example, a child reads A Christmas Carol, and they're not going to remember, in chapter 3. What they're going to remember are certain aspects, like when Scrooge's door handle turns into Marlowe. That's going to be a defining moment of that chapter, and that's what they remember, not the chapter number, for example. De Wall, with her experience with children, understands how they may perceive and retain information. Stitching that directly into the structure of the book allows for the presumably older readers to obtain that perspective and to, in a sense, embody the distance of the close third-person perspective that is listening in on Leon's inner thoughts and actions. Ultimately, again, creating that childlike disparity between Leon, his maturer thought processes, and us as a presumably older audience. Because there may be, early teenagers, young adults that read this, but obviously the events will become cloudier without extensive study. The younger they are, a lot of these things will fly by. This is something that really is for when you're picking it out and you're a little bit older and you understand these concepts, that it really becomes vivid and solid, and it's beautifully woven in. And that is my video essay, or vlog, which is a video log. I don't know why I explained that, but there we go. Thanks for watching.